This is the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and here are the best camera settings for the iPhone 17 Pro and the Pro Max. First off, let's go to the settings. From here, let's go to the camera. As you can see, the camera control, we left it at camera. Photographic style, I actually left it as standard, but as you can see, it says custom standard, which I'm going to talk about in a second. From there, let's go into the recording video, recording slow-mo, and recording cinematic. I'd highly recommend going at 4K 60 frames per second, and as you can see, 3 times 4K. Because of that, you have more resolution, just better for post-production. Overall, the image is going to be looking sharper. At the same time, I record at 60 frames per second because you never know if you want to maybe in post slow it down. Maybe something happened and you want to slow it down at least twice, so that way you can slow it down to 50% of its speed and still have 30 frames per second, and 4K 120 frames per second when we record slow motion. Cinematic at 30 frames per second because it adds in the background blur. Record sound at stereo because it's gonna be the most compatible with different devices that you might have and different software. As for formats, if you ever plan to use that footage or photos or videos anywhere other than your iPhone, I highly recommend going for most compatible. Thanks to this, you can transfer it to your computer and edit that in post-production, just having more flexibility and the footage is gonna look better. For example, videos sometimes recorded in high efficiency look totally washed out and different than on the screen on the iPhone. But if you put it in most compatible, if you put it into something like DaVinci Resolve or even just watching it on your computer, it should look as it was when recorded. Photo mode, 24 megapixels. I would enable the Pro RAW and resolution control. Thanks to this, you can take the full advantage and the higher resolution of these cameras. For the Pro RAW, I actually went with the most compatible once again, just to have that most compatibility when doing any work in post-production. I also enabled the Apple ProRes and the ProRes encoding into the log. Thanks to this, we have a really flat picture profile that we can edit in post-production. From here, let's go to the camera app. On the camera app, as you can see, we don't have too much of the settings here, but for everyday shooting, I would go for JPEG 24 megapixels, which is great for everyday shooting. If we're doing a raw photo, I highly recommend going for 48 megapixel because let's take the full advantage of what this sensor has to offer, since we're still gonna be editing that in post-production. So for everyday, I would go for JPEG 24, and when you know that you want to edit that in post-production, raw 48 megapixels. As for the styles, this is something that I mentioned before, why it is custom standard, because actually I noticed that the stock photos from the app, from the camera app on the iPhone, tend to look out really washed out, really HDR looking, and I'm not a biggest fan of that. I feel like it really shows that mobile photography. Because I have been using the Xiaomi 14 Ultra for my daily driver for over a year at this point, I was actually trying to match that tone, that camera look, because the Xiaomi 14 Ultra really had that camera look to it. So I tried to match it a little bit more closer to that in that regard, while still benefiting from the nicer dynamic range of the iPhone. I noticed that about -30 in tone and +21 in color. As you can see, you can change it all around here to your liking. And you can change it to your own personal liking. I personally did with that, and I sometimes still change it depending on the scene. But thanks to this, I add in a little bit less of that HDR look where everything is washed out. I bring back the shadows a little bit and that contrast into the photos and add in more color to make it pop. But you can play around with those settings as much as you want. It is up to you how you set it up, but I would really advise to try to look into having a little bit different settings so that you can have great photos straight out of the camera without having to edit them in post-production. Other than that, if we go into the video, as you can see, we have the 4K 60 frames per second. Like I said, 4K 60 frames per second is great for everyday shooting. If you want to record in log and have that more flat picture profile and edit that in post-production to take advantage of what these cameras can actually do, you would have to have a separate extra small SSD connected to your iPhone. If you are gonna do that, you probably know what you're doing, so I'm gonna leave it at that. But if you want to use the log format, you do have to have an external SSD connected to it. Unless you're shooting in 4K 30 frames per second. But for that, I would highly recommend you use it with a tripod and having a steady shot, so it really looks the best you can. If you're doing any kind of movements, I would highly recommend 60 frames per second and getting an external SSD for that. But other than that, you cannot really do much in the app. But one pro tip, you can actually download the Blackmagic Cam. And while it is made by Blackmagic, it is actually in kind of a collaboration with Apple. Not only have the Apple log formats on this app, you also have in DaVinci Resolve later ability to color grade and even have shortcut to Rec 709 in DaVinci Resolve with the color space transform. So if you really want to take advantage of the cameras on this iPhone, I highly recommend checking out the Blackmagic app, where you can change the lenses to your liking, you can change the frame rate, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, and tint, making it really be like a professional camera. But as you can see, it is a flat picture profile. And if I put a LUT in, so like 709, it looks much different. But if I turn it off, it's much more flat. As you can see, it is the Apple Log 2 HDR. You can set up everything you want. So codec, you can change it to Apple ProRes RAW even. But in that case, you still once again have to have an external SSD. If you do not have one, you cannot do it that way. But having just the iPhone with you and nothing else, you can always go for the H.265, and then from here you can change the bitrate. Once again, 4K is great, and with color space you can actually set it to Apple Log and Apple Log 2 or Rec 709, but I'd highly advise trying out the Apple Log 2 so you have that more dynamic range in post-production, which is pretty cool coming from a smartphone. Also, if you have an SSD and you do use the Apple ProRes RAW, you can actually use the open gate, meaning you have a more squarish kind of a footage, which is great for capturing video for both short form content and long form content, because you can crop it out much better from that instead of having a horizontal or vertical video. And if you know what you're doing, if you're on this app, you can probably set up everything else by yourself, because let's be honest, if you are using this app, you probably know what you're doing. And with that being said, these have been the best camera settings for your iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max. If you have any more questions or there is something that I didn't mention in this video, please let me know in the comment section down below. In the future, I'm actually planning to release LUTs, both free and paid, for the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max. If you're ever interested in any of my LUTs or presets, check out the link down below for my website and my store, where I have my LUTs and presets for different devices. So make sure to subscribe and be on the lookout for that. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video once again, and I'll see you next time.